My name is Mike Vandermeer. I'll do a little introduction, and then we'll do a little bit of different types of artists, and then what I realized is, I've spent 35 years as an artist, and I figured out how to budget, for myself. And as you'll see, there's probably a few hundred bullet points, which is you'll probably go, wow, that guy's such a smart guy about budgeting. But in fact, it's my hundreds of mistakes I've made over the years. So hopefully you guys will be able to shortcut that and get straight on to art making rather than worrying about the money part. So like I said, I've been doing art for 35 years. Most of the materials I like are stainless steel and glass, just because they basically last forever. And we have a company, Creative Artworks, which is myself and art school friend Cheryl. So we've been doing it together ever since then. And we have artwork all the way from, this one's in Dallas, so as far south as Dallas. We have this one up here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And I'll probably come back to this one. You'll see it looks like a pretty simple installation, but this will come back in the budgeting risks section a bit later. And as you can see, I love polished stainless steel. You can totally see how the difference between morning versus night, it changes so dramatically. And here's one in Ottawa. So basically north, south, east, and west for all of our pieces. There's Ottawa at night. It turned out prettier than I thought. All the traffic lights, the lights from the cars actually ended up twinkling up and down the poles, which we didn't actually think was going to happen. And I was like, oh, we have an extra bonus there. And we have one here in Kelowna, in the Capital News Sports Center. Okay. Well, here's what you're all here about. When you guys think about money, what does it do to you? I guess the first part of this is my hardest part of budgeting, it turned out, wasn't my math skills. I actually have a degree in physics, but it was all the emotions around money, and it kept getting in the way. So just take a note when you're thinking about money, when you're doing a budget, or a client's complaining that something's too expensive or whatever it is, take note of what your emotions are and write them down, because there'll be some that you'll have that are just you, right? And so it'll be a good growth experience, and you'll get better and better at budgeting if you can figure out what your reaction actually is. So here's some of the ones, for me. Defensive sometimes, tight shoulders. Quick show of hands, who finds it easy to talk about money? Maybe, yeah. Okay, perfect. And difficult? Yeah? Yeah, it's pretty difficult. If you think about why, here's me. Being raised Canadian, I always thought, well, it's just impolite, It's like, yeah, you're not supposed to talk about money. You're not supposed to ask people how much they make, what their job pays. We've been taught that it's rude. It's presumptuous. The person is coming in to talk about maybe having you do a piece of art, and it feels presumptuous to just get right to the point to say how much money you'd have to spend. Let's get, this might be a very short conversation. It might be a long conversation. So let's get that part out of the way. And then a big one for me, especially when starting out, some of these art budgets are pretty big. You're asking people to give you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm like, I'm not really an artist. Am I really an artist? You feel like an imposter, or that feeling greedy. So those are one. And then the one at the bottom, being naive about business norms. I think over time, getting exposed to more and more people who run different types of businesses, I was always shocked at how much they charged per hour. I was like, oh, that's orders of magnitude more than I do. What am I doing wrong? So once I got kind of used to it, it helped with those other ones. So as I was saying here, if it was just numbers, it would be easy. There's lots of videos on YouTube, so I'm not going to go through the mechanics, of how do you budget and add up the numbers or any of that stuff. You can look that all up. And mostly, if you got the feelings figured out, the rest is just pretty simple. So I found the biggest things that I did, it's a real pressure. I mean, God, I still do it 35 years later. I overpromise to get the job, or I underbid. I can do it. Please pick me, right? And that's a real hard one because, it is a competition often. And the best is when the client just walks in and says, I want you. And then you're like, yay, I don't have to do that. But most of the time it's a competition. So yeah, you have a real, I don't know, hopefully you have somebody in your life that's a real, we'll get to that, who can review your stuff for you. So the different types of artists, these are just like a smattering of the landscape, but I just don't want to assume, of course, that everyone's an artist in the same sense that I am. And so you got everything from hobbyists, early career. Here we got a friend of mine's grandfather makes these trucks, so the grandkids are going to have lots and lots of those trucks and toys and cranes and whatever. Everyone has different expenses, of course, depending. A hobbyist, in fact, might pay for making their art. It could be a cost sink to them. So for every one of you, it's going to be different. You got, of course, the mid-career where your poor spouse is saying, stop using the garage, get a studio. And then, of course, one of my favorites here on the right is Calder and his studio, which I love his art and I love his studio, so I had to put those up. And of course, I'm entering this one now, the senior one. We'll see. Hopefully, my elbows won't hurt too much to polish stainless steel, at least for another 10 years or so, I hope. So just think about that, who you are. Here I've done it in text-based and different categories. And no right and wrong. Everyone is just where they are. Some people have rich partners who can subsidize them, or one of my friends has some sort of giant trust fund where he could just write a check to buy a house. I'm like, wow, okay, that's different thought pattern than I have. I think I'm kind of the two bottom ones. I have a studio on Granville Island. It's 3,000 square feet, and it varies between just the two of us to up to 9 people working, depending on how big the project is. And then we're moving into being fabrication-based as well, which is interesting. There's less and less studio space in Vancouver, and so there's a lot of artists now who want to have their work built, but they don't have any place to build it, and so they'll come to us and we'll be like, okay, yeah, we can work with you, and we'll build some of it or we'll build all of it. It's a new thing. I've never done that before. It's interesting trying to get somebody else's vision out, and be true to it. All right, so how much do you actually need per year? So I'm going to do this for Vancouver, I guess, approximately. And I'll give you just ballpark numbers. And but if you think about it, just think about yourself. What does it take for you to live in a year? And pick a number. When I was willing to sleep on a floor, it was a much lower number. And now I definitely want more comfort, and I definitely want savings for retirement. And it's important to be able to vacation and rest and travel the world and meet other artists and see, what other people have done. And so definitely let's not call it vacation, we'll call it like professional development. That way you can probably write it off. And then there's your studio. Again, some people, it's just on their kitchen table, and that's awesome because, very low rent. I find that my studio keeps me awake at night thinking of how much money every single day costs me. Now you got the payments for the equipment, your materials testing, insurance, all that stuff. You get all that. Proposal time's a big one, and I'd say I spend probably 20% of my time doing proposals. And I mean, you get paid for them, but you don't really get paid for them. You're like, it's probably below minimum wage if you really think of it. It's definitely below the amount of money that the studio sucks up. And accounting and legal, that's one always a good idea. If you have a friend who's an accountant and a friend who's a lawyer, great. But otherwise, try to have, there'll be things that come up where you're going to go, I don't know what's going on, I need advice, and they're worth every penny. And then, of course, all the stuff I never used to think about, but tool replacement, maintenance, all the tool maintenance, all those months where no one's coming in the door. I think we all got that with COVID. It's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Anyway, all of these sorts of things. And a buffer, some sort of a buffer that you can, it'll help you not stress so much and help with the emotions. Again, if somebody comes in with a job, you're not gonna overpromise because you're like, I have a bit of money in the bank. And of course I did a graphic because, it's a talk. But most of the stuff is, the ones above here, rent, materials, labor, those ones are kind of obvious, right? But there's other costs that you should keep in mind that kind of, I always used to think, I'm focused all the time and whatever. But the fact is, if somebody comes in and they want to talk, well, they talk for 10 minutes and then it takes you 20 minutes to go, what was I doing again? And then get back into it and get the brain going again. So there's all of that, in your energy. There's things like risks. You're going to take a risk if you want to grow as an artist. Maybe you're going to try a new material or a new process or whatever, a different scale. And, hopefully you will fail sometimes because I find that's when you really grow. You're like, wow, I didn't know that about that. And so there's all these kind of invisible costs. So, as you go through, you'll figure out what those are. But keep in mind that they're there and don't discount them because I used to just be like, I would be puzzled as to why at the end of the day, if I added up 8 hours, I would be, why didn't I get 8 hours of work done? And, these are the types of things. And they're all legitimate things. You do have to talk to people when they come in and you got to do all these things. So just price them into your budget. So, and then again, I've done it kind of here as a slide with a text. And hopefully, I'm not really sure, but I would say maybe the PDF can go on the Richmond website or something, and then, or there could be a link to it. Yeah? Okay, yeah. Because then, reading during these things is terrible. But, there's all these things that you just, keep, if you're reading those and you're thinking decision fatigue or proposal writing fatigue, oh my God, those are all there. So, do think about them. And then we've got these things, structural costs. I've said yes to misaligned work. I'm just desperate, and people are like, do you want to do this? And I'm like, oh my God. And at the end of the day, it's taken up all my energy, and it's broken all my tools. And at the end of the day, I didn't really end up with any more money in the bank. I've just tried to... misaligned, let's say, well, here's like a totally awful example. It's a perfect example. Somebody was like, oh, I have all these garbage bins that I need welded. Can you weld them? And I was like, okay, sure. Bring them in, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to just say if someone comes in and says that, don't. But, you think, yeah, it'll be good. I'll make some money. I put some money in the bank. But, in the end of the day, it would have been better just to say, I'm going to make no money for this week, and I'm just going to think about, what could I do that's art related, even if it's just like go to the art gallery or read or do some more proposals or something. So just be careful about that. Yeah. It can be a tricky one too, because of course that's such an obvious example that, well, who would want to do that, right? But it'll be something that's like even, and there was a problem with, or a challenge mentally of having other people come in and be a fabricator for another artist. And I go, well, what's their art about? I mean, I have certain values in life, certain beliefs, and I'm like, does this align with those beliefs? So there's an example. Do I want to be spending my life energy working on, I don't know, giant swastikas or something? I'm like, no. But, so just, I mean, obviously things are more subtle than that, but just be, just keep that in mind, right? And just think about it, and yeah. We got opportunity costs as well. So, now that I'm older and about to be retired, I realize, like time is one of those things that you're never going to get it back. And so, that week of garbage cans, well, great, but it really didn't move me forward. So, but there's other ones, unpaid proposals, fixing underpriced projects where, you're basically working for free, or networking, all those sorts of things that, you think, I could be doing something better than this. And then as far as like zooming out, the ecosystem, right? Like, and I'll talk about this kind of more at the end. As artists, we're alone, we think, like we're in our studio, we're doing our stuff, but we are part of a whole community, and the things that I do, they either help or hinder that whole community. So yeah, so let's say if I underbid on something, and then the client's like, well, the next artist they're talking to, they're like, well, I got that for way cheaper than that last time I got an artist in, right? So what you'll do is you contribute to this, I call it an ecosystem. So one of the ones that's bothering me now is a bit of like younger artists, and maybe I was just super lucky, but I was able to pretty early on just become an artist, and I've been doing it, full time for 35 years. And you see a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I should be a teacher, or I'll get another job. And then after doing 40 or 60 hours at my regular job every week, then I'll do my art at night or something, and then subsidize my art. And that seems to be getting more and more, maybe because Vancouver's getting more and more expensive, and studio space is getting harder and harder to find, but I don't know. That one there that's an ecosystem cost, and I think we should all at least keep it in mind so that we can fight against it, or at least if you see it happening, I don't know, maybe we can think of a way to have the younger artists believe that they can be full-time artists. So there's all the emotional stuff, and it was way longer at first. And, my partner was saying, is this like a torture session? Are you going to be torturing them for the whole hour? And I was like, okay, I'm not going to. The reason I did those emotional and mental costs, so just think of them, if you go back and read the PDF, identify what they are for you. And when they come up, let's say for me, if I'm like undervaluing myself, or if I feel like anxiety, thinking, oh, I have to get this, just slow down, right? Just go, this is the first date, we're having coffee, I'm not getting married, I don't have to figure out, what I mean? Don't jump straight to, I'll sign the contract, just slow down. So there's no reason you can't postpone, just say, hey, let's cut the meeting a bit short, and maybe you'll come back next week or whatever, we can pick this up. Just don't rush forward, because a red flag, I think, this is my physics brain, but I think our emotions are kind of like a compression algorithm. So, like if you're mad about something, it's like there's an injustice happening. You might not know what it is, but your body knows, right? So just go, oop, red flag. I'm going to go and think about what's going on, and then you can come back again. So that's my advice, slow down. Alrighty, so here we go. Hopefully, you're all going to follow all this advice, and you will be stable as an artist. And for everyone else, it's kind of different, because like my my rich friend, he doesn't have to think about rent or whatever. But, you know, what is it? What is it for you? What would stable mean for you? Yeah, so just think about those. And again, there's no right or wrong, right? Some people who are like, well, you know what, I only want to do 1 week of art a year. You're like, oh, okay. Well, if you can afford to do that, or if that's what you want to do, that's great. But figure it out for yourself. This is just the first, 7 things that popped into my head. But and one thing I think, I mentioned it before, or the last two, emotional freedom. So when I'm stressed, I don't explore. I do what I already know how to do. It's like, oh, I know how to do a landscape painting. I'll just do one of those again or whatever. And I think, no, just try not to be stressed, right? Be stable. And that way you have freedom. You can do something completely different. And you can make mistakes. You can say, I don't know how to do this. I'm just going to try. And then you go, oh, okay, now I know what I don't know. So here we go. Those were the four things. And then, so for me, let's just say as a general thing, I'll just come up with a number. It's not really that accurate, but let's say I need, $60,000 to live in Vancouver, and my studio cost me about, I don't know, probably around $80,000 a year. So you go, okay, so that's $140,000. And then you say, well, good, I got 2,000 hours, so I can charge, $70 an hour, right? But that's actually a myth. So you got to take your vacation. You got to take, life things that happen that you don't want to miss. Again, 20% of your time proposal writing. It might be less. It depends on what type of art you want to be doing. Administration and bookkeeping, marketing, installation travel, so just getting there. It could be a few days to get there, a few days to get back. Like Dallas was a few weeks to do that one. Material sourcing, which is getting harder and harder now. It seems like all the businesses are moving out of Vancouver. So it's like, oh, where do I get that now? Studio maintenance, like cleaning your studio and fixing your tools and whatever. So. And this is why having an accountant's a good idea, because they went through and they're like, Mike, you only have 1,000 billable hours. On a good year, you have 1,000 billable hours. And I was like, oh, okay, now I have a different number, right? So if I think about that, 140,000 divided by 1,000, so I have to basically charge $140 an hour to break even. So that's not buying new tools, or making a profit, putting a buffer, buying materials, any of that stuff. So it's 140 plus. And a friend of mine was like, oh, your business is like a giant amoeba. And so that's interesting. I think, okay, yeah. I mean, I always think of it as like there's me and Cheryl, and then there's this third super greedy person, which is our company. And it needs the majority of the money. So we're like, okay, we'll feed you. And so I thought that was a good metaphor. All right, now pay attention to your personality type. So I'm an optimist. So, I'm like, I'm just going to build a plane. How hard could that be? I mean, right? Look, you get a box of parts, you bolt them together. There you go. You'll be smiling in no time, right? So that's me. I have to keep that in mind when I'm budgeting. On the other hand, you might be like some of my friends who I run my project budgets by, pessimist. They're like, actually, this is what your project's going to more be like. And it's interesting, right? Because as an optimist, when I say yes, my friends say, well, maybe he can do it. If I say no, they're like, oh, this is definitely can't be done. And then, my pessimist friends, if they say yes, I go, well, they can, obviously, they think about it in such detail, so of course it can happen. And if they say, no, it can't be done, it can probably be done. So, and what that means is, surround yourself. Here's somebody in, what we call echo chamber. Try not to get into an echo chamber, people who just agree with everything you say. You think it's a great idea. You're going to make waterproof tea bags. They're like, sure, put your life savings into that. You definitely, if you're an optimist, get some pessimists in your life and vice versa. I think it's worth the challenge for sure. All right, now here comes the practical ones. So one thing they had to figure out, and I struggle with this one, are you going to outsource or fabricate yourself? And, I lie awake at night adding up the dollars per day that my studio costs, and I think, I should just outsource, right? It'd be so easy all the time, all the downtime between projects. I wouldn't have to worry, but there are trade-offs, right? So, how many people have a studio, and how many? Yeah, yeah, sort of, yeah, shared or something. Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, and then outsourcing, where there's lots of companies who can build things for you. So which one? So here we go. So if you fabricate your work, right, you have full artistic vision. You have control over it. I don't know, I'm so old here, like the movie Spinal Tap, Lost in Translation. I don't know if you saw that, right? The 18-inch Stonehenge comes down, and he's like, it was supposed to be 18 feet. And there's lots of those, and that's an obvious one. But there'll be a thing like, art's a very subtle thing, right? So especially like a sculpture, like if there's a weld seam and you can see it, and you're like, why did you stick it right in the middle? Like, could you not have welded it off to the side, right? But a fabricator's not thinking that. They're like, I got a bunch of metal and this is the fastest way to do it, right? Because they're not making art, they're making money, right? So it's really hard. You got to really, you spend a lot of your time hovering around and pissing them off because they think, oh, that guy's back again. And then problem solving, because as much as you think something through, there'll always be something, right, where you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. If it's in your shop, you can just figure it out on the moment, whereas if it's in somebody else's shop, you're going to get a call, and then you got to schedule a meeting, and then you got to go out there. Yeah, so it's slow. It's quite a bit slower. Sometimes you save on materials because, if you're outsourcing, even if they only use 6 feet of the material, they're still charging you for the 20-foot piece. You don't get a discount. Whereas if you can throw I have giant racks of scrap, right? And sometimes we're like, oh my God, almost this entire job can come out of our rack. So which is a bonus. And also you get better at things by doing it. So I think that's great. I mean, I like building things. So if you like doing the thing that your art is, then that's what you should do, right? And that's what I think. And also, create a flexibility during the build. Sometimes you'll be halfway through or not quite, but you'll be going through and going, this is speaking to me in a slightly different way than I thought it was, like the material or whatever, the form and the scale, and you're like, I'm going to make it a little bit different because I'm going to accentuate the thing that's giving me this emotional reaction, right? So, of course, here is all the bad sides. It's like basically money, 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 money. Yeah. And maintaining your own tools. I spend a fair bit of time trying to do that. And pressure to, weld garbage cans. So now, outsourcing is great. I mean, between jobs, let's say, I don't know, like during a slow time, you got 6 months, you don't have a job. Well, you don't have 6 months of studio rent, right? So that, for me, that would save me $40,000 or whatever. So that would be great. I'd love to keep that money in my pocket. Or if you decide, I'm going to go to Europe for 6 months, well, go ahead. You don't have a shop that you have to keep going, right? So there's all of that. But unfortunately, when you outsource, they're going to charge you a lot of money because they have to cover when they go to Europe, and they have to cover when they have a slow downtime, right? So, for me, the less direct control. And the last one for me is the one that I find the worst is you're basically a project manager. So, if you're like, I'm going to be an artist, and if that to you is sitting in front of a computer and a telephone and nagging at people, well, I mean, great. That's more like performance art or something. But I don't like doing those things. I'd rather do the actual work. So anyway, but some people, some people love being project managers. So, and then of course, here it is in a nice little table. Now, because of course I like the in-house approach, I think this also factors into what it's like to be an artist. So I don't know if it forced me to, but it certainly gave me the excuse for sharing the studio with other artists. So, my first studio back in 1990, was, with Cheryl and 2 other artists. And, Cheryl and I are still making art together, right? So that's 35 years. So, we wouldn't have had that moment where we go, we are so opposite that we should work together, because there's no way I could have thought of what you just thought of. So you share the overhead and the energy. And also, during slow times, if you have a beautiful place to have like a rave and some parties, all that sort of stuff, right? And you can make money on all that stuff as well. Anyway, it gives you that flexibility. So I'm kind of, if you can do it, in-house approach. Alrighty. So what I found this is budgeting super hard. Like I was saying, it's like self-analysis or counseling, self-counseling or something, when you talk about all those emotions. And but luckily, in terms of the numbers, there's these things here called standards. So people have put a lot, and they're smart people, they put a lot of thinking into it. Canada Council has done a lot of research analysis. They have a bunch of statistical resources where they've interviewed all the artists they could in Canada. How much do you make? How much do your studio cost? All those sorts of things, right? So they came up with numbers. And also, anyway, here we go. Standards, why they exist. And I think, reduce undercutting I think that's a good one. Reduce hidden labor, I think that's a good one in the sense that, and we'll get to it, like Carfax, they have a whole list of things that you're supposed to get paid for, right? And I remember going through there, and I'm like, oh, I always do that for free. Oh my God, I should be getting paid for that. So there's all this hidden labor, right, that you should. What's that? Undercutting, yeah, that's where you're like, I'll do it for half the cost of that other artist. Yeah. And that's like a race to the bottom at that point. So by having standards, and it turns out, my engineering friends are saying, oh yeah, we have a book of standards ourselves, right? It's like, how much does it cost to do this type of drawing or that type of drawing or this type of calculation? They have, their ballparks, right? So at least if you look at the standard and your number is half, then maybe maybe there's costs you didn't think about, or if it's double, maybe, I don't know, if you can get away with it, awesome. So Carfax, have people heard about that? It's pretty, yeah, they're pretty awesome. I mean, my God, they have so much stuff. What I like about them is, so they have the fee scheduling guidelines, and they're getting recognized by institutions. So like in the beginning, when they first started, if I was saying, hey, this Carfax thing, it says you should be paying me this much money for doing this or whatever, and people are like, who are they, right? You're like, well, I agree with them. I think I should get paid that amount. But now, people, you just bring it up, and people are like, I know what it is. I know what the numbers are, and so that's great. So these things get, they get institutionalized at that point. They're entrenched in society, so that's great. So less of those arguments. And I don't know who, since you all know, and no one wants to take a picture of a QR code in this day and age, except one person. So this is the Carfax website, just in case you have a poor memory like me. So they cover all these things, and we'll zip through because you guys know it already, but all these fees, reproduction rights, that was one. We did a big project, and turns out, the people were like, can we make a book out of this using these characters? And we're like, oh. And so then our lawyer's like, oh yeah, we got this licensing stuff. We're like, oh, okay, I didn't even know about that. So here we go. This is the kind of the individual pricing decisions accumulate and become culture, which is basically, If you undercharge, then others are forced to do so, and then artists go broke, and art becomes devalued in society. So that would be one example. Alrighty, so here is the risk. How are we doing for time? So for risk, there's a lot of risk, and yeah, like I said, you'll be like, wow, how did you think of all these things? It's like, well, because I did them all, in the bad sense of the word. So we got, these are kind of, we'll go through all these in kind of a page each, but technical risk. So do you know how to weld? Or do you know how to do a thing, do you know how to cast, or do you know how to do that? And you're like, oh yeah, I think I know how to do it, but in fact you don't. So that could be a problem. There's a financial risk, and there's a lot of that. Yeah, we'll go into that a bit more. Timing risk. We've had, well, we have a project that we signed prior to COVID, and they're still stalling. We're like, we've had this contract signed since, what is that, 2019? They're like, yeah, the money hasn't quite come yet. And we're like, oh, gee, we kind of counted on that. So there's that. Subcontractor risk, which can be that they do a terrible job, or you didn't catch something, or they misinterpreted something, or they go bankrupt. And that happened to a friend of mine who, their subcontractor had all those materials. It was like tens of thousands of dollars of materials, and the sculpture was basically half done, and they went bankrupt, and the sheriffs came in and they seized it all, right? And they're like, well, that's our stuff. It's like, yeah, no, technically it's not. So, yikes. Payment risk. Well, that one's pretty obvious, where they don't pay you. And then there's political risk, which is another one that we're working on, where the project has taken so long that the government changed, and so then new people were in charge, and they were like, we're doing a review of this project, and we'd like some changes. And you're like, oh, so are we starting again as far as the money? No, there's no more money. And I used to think people were evil because everyone wants to download the risk, the complexity, and the coordination onto you, right? It's like the developers or everyone, right? And I was like, oh, that's awful. Well, it turns out I do the same. So when I get a subcontractor, I want them to take the risk. I want them to deal with the complexity and the coordination. I'm like, I'll write you a check. Just make sure it's done by that date, right? So I can't think that everyone's evil if I do it.
Well, how do you download the risk system?
Well, you'll like say have a fixed cost, and you'll say, well, I'll give you the specs of what it needs to be. I'm not going to give you like detailed drawings. Like I'm not going to spend like 50 hours coming up with where does every screw go and where does every bolt go, or any of that stuff, right? So that's their complexity. So I'm willing to write them a check for more money, but I don't want to deal with the details. And then the risk is that they're taking the risk of giving me a price. They say, yeah, I can do that for $5,000. And I go, well, okay. Usually don't pick the lowest bidder, because probably the one in the middle is probably actually the one. But that's a risk that they're going to take. And then, so they'll do the coordination. They'll work out the details of how it's actually going to go together if it doesn't affect your art. Yeah. Does that can I answer the?
So they have enough money to do it, right? Not the lowest bidder.
Yeah. You don't want. And sometimes we pick the lowest bidder for other reasons, and they're going to come back, right? And they'll be like, could I have some more money? You're like, yeah. I was waiting for that phone call. So here's what modern artists, right? We're supposed to be all these things: designer, fabricator, project manager, general contractor, negotiator, risk manager, cash flow manager. And they go, oh, I didn't sign up for all these other jobs. I just want to make art, right? So and these things come up. So I've had public institutions, let's say a city, and they're saying, well, you build it, and then once it's done and installed, we'll pay you. But like completely after, right? And I'm like, well, that's going to be a year, so I'm going to be floating, $400,000 of a loan.
Do they actually do that? Like make you fund the project and then pay you in the end?
Yeah, we've had that, but we've pushed back though. We said, well, we're again, like it's the biggest project we've ever done, and we're like, I think we're walking away, because then we're like, let's slow down. That advice to slow down. We're like, we'll get back to you, and then anyway, so yeah, we did get back to them. We said, well, okay, but we're going to charge you like 20% or 22% financing fee, and they're like, well, there's no extra money, and then we're like, well, you figure that out.
Can you do progress billing with them though?
Yeah, so, and what we did, and what I'll say what you should do on all that is get prepaid. So there'll be milestones, and what they want, of course, is to download the risk to you, and you want to download it to them. So hopefully you have a good relationship. But you get paid up front, a chunk, so usually like your artist fee, and then let's say your first thing is to buy materials, you get paid in advance of buying the materials, and then once the material, you can send them a photo, you said, look, I've spent the money on that. The next thing is whatever, the engineering, so then they pay you the money for the engineering. So get paid in advance, because, and that's again a timing risk, right, where let's say that job that we started in 2019, so what's that, 7 years, they wouldn't have paid us for that first chunk of engineering work but luckily we got paid in advance. So when everything slowed down and they kind of, they haven't said they're not doing it, but we'd have been stuck with that. We'd be chasing them and whatever, right? So, and then regulatory risk, oh my God. That one up in Fairbanks, Alaska, it had a Buy America clause. So every atom of that sculpture had to be made in America. And it turns out one of the installation crew, we had to hire, a local crew, and they had lost some of the nuts. So we're like, we'll just go to Home Depot and buy some new nuts, right? Well, those nuts didn't have the certification paperwork trail, so we couldn't prove that they were made in America. Oh my God. So yeah, they're like, well, we can't pay you the rest of the money until somehow you figure out that those nuts were made in America. And we're like, oh, interesting. Also, oh my God, that other one up there. So in terms of risk, this is the one that bugs me a fair bit, is where the institution says, here's the money, but it includes the foundation. And so in Alaska, we were like, no, we're not. We'll give you a little chunk of our budget, whatever you think is a kind of a fair amount, but you have to do it all. Because, and it turned out, I'm glad that we did that, because it was in permafrost, and it had it had like sewer, high voltage electrical, a water main, I don't know, it had so many things underneath it. And they ended up digging a 20 foot by 20 foot by almost 20 foot deep hole, and then they had to dig around all this stuff. I think it cost them more than the sculpture did just to put that pad in, right? And luckily we were like, no, we're not doing it. So, but that would have bankrupted us, right, if that had happened. So, and that's again, managed construction logistics without compensation, because we were saying, look, we're artists. I'm not a civil engineer. I don't know about infrastructure. I don't know how close I can dig to a sewer pipe. I'm not. I'd have to go back to university just to put in my foundation, right? So, yeah, just push back on that one. I mean, if you're selling somebody a painting and they say, great, just before you hang it on the wall, could you renovate that part of my living room, make it a bit bigger, make the wall a bit stronger or something? That one's obvious. You would say no, but I don't know. It seemed everyone knowing that line, right? And then learning the law by trial and error. again, having a lawyer that's friendly and can tell you when you're about to make a mistake is really great. So here's what we should do. I think, let's say public art departments, and most are doing this. So I remember when everyone was new at the job, this stuff was less clear. So I'm really happy with the way things are going, but the public art department should have detailed proposal requirements. You know, it's like, do they need drawings? Do they not need drawings? What level of budgeting? So defining the deliverables for the artist. So, you know, so that you're not signed up for the job and saying, oh my God, and oh yeah, didn't we tell you? Yeah, you're doing the foundation. So that sort of thing, right? So clarity is what we want. And that gets back to, you know, those standards, right? Like CARFAC. And then again, this is what you were asking there, right? Getting paid up front. And retainage is at the end, right? Sometimes at the end they say, well, we're going to hold back 20% until it's finally approved, or 30 days or 60 days after it's installed. You know, I've been saying, well, that's more than my entire profit. So how 20% is more than I make. So I can't do it. I just can't afford to do it. So again, push back on that.
Structural warranty for whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. I mean, for me, I don't even think, I guess it's a tool, right, that the commissioning agency can use to kind of force you to do something that you don't think you should do, but they thought you should do. But I don't know, for a sculpture, it's pretty, I guess if the conversation around that starts to be too complicated, then I go back to the idea of thinking, we haven't had enough clarity about what's going on here, because at the end, it should be clear. The truck arrives, there's a sculpture, I've tightened the bolts, give me my money. I mean, it's not going to fall down, or I don't know, you know. So I don't like holdbacks. So as you can probably tell, sometimes 10% though is done. So I'll begrudgingly say yes to that. But I will ask them why, though. You know, they have to have a good reason, not just, well, that's the rule. So, and then oftentimes prime contractors. So if you're gonna be doing stuff like getting stuff built on site and coordinating a bunch of stuff besides just making the art, then you need to be paid for all of that as well. So keep that in mind. And then if you're not a project manager type, like if you don't like doing it, you can't hire them, right? So, or the public art people can hire them and say, here's a construction manager. Often the developer will have a construction manager, and they're great. And he says, hey, Bob, I need that concrete pad poured, and here's the drawing. And then they'll be like, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. And then this has been great. Template contracts have developed over the years. Public art departments all seem to have really good ones now. All the wrinkles have been worked out. CARFAC is a baseline. Those are great. Again, it normalizes that people should be paid a certain amount and reduces the downward pressure, right, of can you do it cheaper? Can you do it cheaper? And then developers, you know, they're pretty smart, right? And so they understand all this stuff. So feel free to just push back on it all the time, right? So this here, treat you like a specialized contractor. So, you know, we've had where they're like, well, we want to pay you as if like you're the guy supplying the drywall for the project. And it's like, well, that it kind of doesn't work that way, because the drywall guy has he has a whole warehouse full of drywall, and he's gonna, whether he's selling it to you or somebody else, his costs are being covered. But you know, I don't have a bunch of sculptures just sitting there waiting for you to call and say, okay, we're ready to get them. It's like, you know, we've been contracted, start paying us right away. Like it's a specialty thing. And if you have a special, like a special need, like a super expensive material or whatever, like we had one project where it had a lot of stainless steel in it, and the price was going up and up and up, like really quickly. Oh, and even with tariffs. And we were like, pay us for that now. We're not at that part of the project now at all. But if you pay us now rather than then, I don't have to charge you 20% more, right? So let's just make that whole payment schedule completely different than what was on paper. And then you'll save money, and I don't have to worry about, getting stuff across the border, for example. So these guys understand all that. So don't be afraid to ask. And then, this is me, why I always get, in my younger years, got taken advantage of. I always did coordination for free, right? I was like, oh, that's fine. My peers were getting paid less, so I was like, I felt lucky. I was like, oh, somebody gave me a commission, or I have to do it, right? And actually that one, fear of losing the opportunity. Oh, you know what? We had money losing jobs at the beginning of our careers, and I think, okay, I guess, what do they call it? The loss leader in retail, right? You think, that's fine. We got to get something in the ground and up that we can photograph so that we have something for our portfolio. So, but don't let it be fear that makes you to do that. Just, you can lose money, but don't let it be fear that causes you to do that. Conflating artist worth with pricing humility. I mean, that's the whole thing I'm saying. Oh yeah, you're a sellout because you make money, right? I'm like, ooh, I like making money, so. And mentorship and contracts, again, we were super lucky because Cheryl's dad was an accountant and his best friend was this super lawyer. So they'd be like, sit down, let me tell you. And then here's what to do if you don't want to turn into a lawyer. Shared standards. CARFAC has standardized, right, for project management percentages. They say 25 to 40%, depending on the complexity of your project. So you'll get your artist fee, let's say 20%. If you're going to project manage it, let's say 25%, 10% contingency, et cetera, et cetera. So it's great because at least it's a wake-up call if they're saying that you should be getting all that money, and that after you add in materials, there's no actual money left for those. Then it's time to redesign, right? So I would say for your budgets, make your budgets. They're a design constraint. Like they'll often say, oh, it's got to fit in this area, or it can't be taller than this, or way more than this. And really do let the budget dictate that. We actually have a clause in our contracts that says, we'll get hired, and then based on this thing that we told you about, but it's not really what the contract's about. So after we get it, then we'll actually redesign it with an approved budget. So that's actual written quotes and signed contracts for anyone who's subcontracting. And then we'll go back and say, this is how much it'll actually cost. I know this is how much you wanted to spend. Do you have more money, or do you want to make a change, make it smaller, make it simpler, whatever, right? And that's a discussion. And sometimes they're like, no, I like what you wanted. Here's extra money. Or sometimes they're like, no, we don't have any extra money at all. So make it whatever size you need to make it fit that budget. So again, it's so hard, right, to be able to think that you could have that conversation, to phone up like the president of a construction or of a development company or whatever and go, hey, that price that you said you were willing to pay, do you have an extra $50,000? Anyway, it was such a hard one. Now I'm like, let's just get the conversation over with quickly. Have your budget conversations early. And then I think we need to just understand this stuff, right? Like what the landscape is of not just for our businesses, but the businesses of the artists around us, and just understand risk, how much it costs to coordinate things, and financing costs if they're going to tell you they want you to pay in advance. And then here's our question. I don't know exactly what I waffle on this one. So what type of artist, ecosystem do we want? I think Canada, US, it's the Wild West. We want individuals, and we want to be entrepreneurs, and we want freedom, which is great. Europe seems to have a bit more institutional. They've been doing it for so long. They're like, we're going to look after artists, but you also have to follow kind of our procedure of how the artwork goes, and this is how much you'll get for this, and this is how much you'll get for that, and this is how long it takes, and this is the paperwork you need to do. And then, which is great because it's safe, but on the other hand, it's like, am I working for you? I thought, I became an artist for freedom, really, and freedom and fun, and I don't want to feel like I'm a bank employee or something. I'm like, oh my God. So, but I don't know. I mean, what do we want, right? So I guess we'll have to all figure that out together. And that's that. So those are policy choices. Yeah. Artists, yeah, focus primarily on concept and oversight. So here we go. You can do this. If you want to focus on the art and you don't want to be a project manager, get a project manager, or be a small artist. That's great too. You could work with experienced fabricators. So let's say for us, for example, and you're like, you know what? I don't want to learn all this stuff, but I don't want to have to learn it. I'm going to come to the studio and you guys are going to do it, and I'm going to hang around and do some of it, and I'll learn. I love doing that, right? So it's like, hey, at the end of this, now you know how to weld, right? So anyway, so that's what I would say. But I would say do whatever it is you're going to do, do it intentionally. And then the final thing is proprietorship or corporation. So they're both, I mean, I have a bias, but corporation for me, here's what they are, by the way, just so you know. So a proprietor, do you guys know all this? No. So proprietorship, it's the easiest. Basically, you're saying, hey, this is me, I'm running a business. And so then when you file your taxes, you just say your proprietorship. There's almost no paperwork. And you don't have to do all these reports, so the government doesn't require you to do all these reports. And there's no real separation, though, so all the money that comes in is considered your income. So it's harder to write stuff off against your taxes. But it's a lot easier in terms of the bookkeeping. So I think below a certain size, like I think if you're doing less than $30,000 of work a year, I'd say be a proprietorship. But yeah, so it's much, much easier. But the bad side is, so a friend of mine is a proprietor, and he had just paid off his apartment, and he was feeling so happy that he could finally not worry, and he ended up losing it because halfway through the project, it was a big project, and halfway through the engineer on the project changed, and they were like, I think the previous engineer got fired, but anyway, the new engineering came in, and they were like, no, all the way all this is being hung, all the way this is being attached to the building, no, you got to redo it all. And so he tried, and yeah, he ended up selling his apartment to try to pay for the artwork. And I don't know. So if he had been a corporation, he could have just said, oh, well, no. He could have just done that. He could have said, I'm going to declare bankruptcy, and you can take the materials and have a nice day, right? So it's a separate legal entity from you. It's considered like a whole new person. And yeah, so it costs thousands of dollars more for doing your accounting and stuff like that, but it gives you a lot more flexibility. So, and mostly your risk, right? So, and oftentimes larger contracts, they won't even accept you as a proprietor. I guess they want to know the clarity of this. Anyway, and this is a final slide. So, comes back to feelings, I guess, a little bit, but if you're ever thinking, am I charging too much? I'd say the answer is probably no. So just think about it. Like if you have money, even if you are charging too much and you get away with it, awesome. Because I think if you have that money and you plow it back into the community and support people, make the cultural community healthy and vibrant, I think that's a way. So I'm really happy, by the way. I was just reading, it was going to be one of these slides, but the Ireland just gave that, they have the guaranteed income for artists. Did you hear about that? So every artist now, you can apply. I think they have 2,000 people now. And you get 1,500 euros a month, no strings attached.
From their income taxes?
Just it's like the government says, if you're an artist, and yeah, you get this money every month. And you have to continue to make art, obviously. But my God, that wouldn't be hard to do. So, yeah.